what are you guys seeing that's blowing your mind that's emerging today? You know, the joke I made last week is Peter and I wrote a book called The Future is Faster Than You Think, and the future is a lot faster than we thought, right? That what's happened has sort of absolutely turbo boost. You know, we talked about how healthcare was going to get reinvented over the next decade. I think it's going to be reinvented over the next year and a half, and a bunch of other stuff. So I wanted to just take a moment to pause. And what are you guys seeing? Salim, why don't we start with you, and then we'll jump to Jane.
So from a technological perspective, I think two things. One is it's clear that, you know, we spent a decade trying to teach leaders about exponentials and the difference between linear to exponential. And what's amazing is you look at the reaction to COVID and how different countries have embraced it. You can see the ones that understand exponentials and the ones that don't. And it's not a great way of learning about it, but I guess now everybody in the world knows about doubling patterns, at least, and they can see it happening going from 0 to 100 to 1,000. All of a sudden you're at 100,000 and you didn't know how you were there. So I think that's a key point that gives us now a baseline to work off. I think, Stephen, your comment about we have a common enemy for the first time is really interesting and a powerful place. I think we have spent 300 years connecting ourselves economically. We have economic interdependence and capitalism driving most of the world forward, but we haven't connected ourselves culturally, biologically, spiritually, tribally. We're still multiple tribes, and we are rife with tribal thinking. And I think the work to do now is to break down tribalism, which worked great in a scarcity world, but doesn't work great in an abundance world. And so I think that's the work to do. And I'm really fascinated by how we would use what's coming to do that. There are 3 technologies that I think are profoundly interesting for the next decade or two. The first is solar energy, because that gives us abundance in energy, and that makes lots of other things easy. And even if it doesn't cover the base load, it'll drive the price down to make it widely available in a broad way. The second, I think, is blockchain, because it allows us to create systems that are trustless. And all of our institutions are built for mistrust and protect against mistrust. And yet now we have an ability to build into the infrastructure trust. And we now have mechanisms like Uber or eBay where we know how to scale trust. What would that look like? And I think the third would be the incredible advances in brain imaging and biosensing and the bio world, CRISPR and others, that give us unbelievable capabilities in navigating and figuring out who we want to be.
That's a fascinating response. That's why I love asking Salim questions. I never get the answer I'm expecting. Trust technologies, tribalism, great answer. Jane, what do you think?
Well, I have a far more prosaic answer to that. But one of the things that I think is really interesting that I have been seeing in the life sciences and the place where engineering and biology intersect is this incredible pivot. Just how quickly companies have gone from doing, cancer vaccine research to, deploying completely new tools and skills to go after a completely new target. And I'm really, really blown away by that. You talk to companies that might have been shut down because what they were doing was not considered essential business, who have now made themselves into the very center of our solutions to the pandemic. I mean, I could talk, like this morning, there was a town hall with Illumina, who are the makers, the largest makers of genome sequencing technology. Mm-hmm. And, the applications for that have just quadrupled. The demand for that has quadrupled. We're looking at the various tools of synthetic biology. So once we can read the genome, what can we do to actually edit and write the genome in new ways? So how can we synthesize, little segments of the genome of the virus in order to propagate that to all of the researchers so that they can start doing targeting and testing and so forth. I mean, the holy grail is diagnostics, right? Diagnostics and testing, treatment, and vaccines. And so literally all of the tools of the life sciences are being used now in one way or another for those applications. And I can tell you about a bunch of different companies that are doing things, both from a technology point of view and also from an investment standpoint. Because every day there's another announcement, including there's a company that does basically, instead of making wine from grapes and sake from rice. They basically get the aromatics of those and then use the molecules to build from scratch the same flavors that you would get without having to harvest or ferment or distill those things. And so, that's kind of fun and interesting. And so they, of course, have now pivoted along with all the other alcohol manufacturers to doing hand sanitizers.
Right.
We were joking earlier about the cancer vaccine researchers in Kentucky who are now switching to figure out how to use the tobacco plant as a mechanism for growing and creating a vaccine. So I would say the technologies that I talk about, what I refer to as like the neobiological technologies, which is like sequencing and big data, neural networks, imaging, and then of course all of the networks for distributing all of that information. All of those technologies are getting a huge boost of interest, of investment, new ways of applying them, to this new outcome. But then on top of that, we have all these other technologies that are now being turned, all these other manufacturers, whether it's the molecular spirit manufacturer or whether it's, Hanes that instead of doing, pull-ups is now going to be doing masks. So it's this retooling of everything that's super interesting. I used to do synthetic biology research for cancer vaccines. Now I'm studying COVID. It's just, you hear that all the way down the line, and it's a fascinating time.
If what you've heard on Flow Research Collective Radio has been helpful, please consider doing us a solid and leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you are listening to this. Reviews help us connect to a wider audience so we can get these peak performance principles out to more people.